Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Hello all, and welcome to the second ep in the second season of Why the Long Face, a podcast that looks at mental illness, sometimes in a humorous way.
Yeah, welcome to Why the Long Face. So you're leading, Ollie, as ever. What are we talking about today?
Well, today we thought we'd talk about the issue of transgender folk.
Yes, because transgender people are actually becoming more and more visible in society, right?
Yeah, and isn't that great, actually? Horrible things are happening in society, we know that, and terrible things around the world. But one of the things is there's a lot more acceptance of people doing what they want and being what they want. It makes me think of all the people who've struggled down the centuries with gender identity or sexual identity and not being accepted and all that suffering that's happened in the past when people have been less accepting. It makes me feel a bit sad, really.
Yeah, because it's not as if having gender dysphoria, in other words, feeling you're in the wrong body, is likely to be anything new just because transgender folk are more visible in society now and therefore more common in the day-to-day work of people like me. It's likely that it's always been there.
It is, and people must have grown up feeling completely bewildered by that. So, what am I feeling here? I don't feel. I don't feel I'm in the right body. I don't feel like I was born the right, or I'm recognised as a gender I want to be recognised.
And we're only now recognising the psychiatric sequelae properly of that, I suppose. Transsexualism was a diagnosis within the ICD classification
As if it was a disease.
Well, that was the problem with it. And we've had declassification of gender identity disorder as well. That's no longer in the DSM-5. The emphasis now is on gender dysphoria, so the feeling of being assigned the wrong gender.
Right. Dysphoria being the opposite of euphoria? Not to get too Greek/Latin about it?
Yeah, discomfort and distress.
Horrible. So I suppose, someone presenting saying, I feel like I'm in the wrong body, I suppose could be misdiagnosed as a psychiatric complaint in days gone by, because it sounds unusual, and it sounds as if there's something going wrong in the brain.
Well, I think probably, yes, unwittingly psychiatrists took a normative view thinking, something's gone wrong in the development of this individual that has made them feel this way. And if only we can get them, correct that so that they are more aligned with their anatomical gender or the anatomical gender they're born with. Yeah.
So you can understand why the mistake was made. It doesn't make it any more tragic, but at least you can sort of understand what they were trying to do. But plainly wrong. So good. That was my first question. You've answered it already due to being a bit of a brain box. The difference between gender dysphoria and gender identity disorder, because I was rather disturbed when I saw gender identity disorder. I thought that doesn't sound right.
Well, that's now no longer a category in the DSM.
So we should talk about gender dysphoria, which is an uncomfortable feeling that you have been assigned the wrong gender. This is a stupid question, which is one of my specialties, as you probably remember, is when people present with gender dysphoria, are there a lot of common traits to it? Because the layman often thinks that it's a man who feels he is in the wrong body and feels that he is a woman in terms of their psychology, and they're born in the wrong body and want to be identified as a woman. So is the trait of feeling that you've been born in the wrong body very, very common in a someone who has gender dysphoria?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that it's not just men wishing.
No, of course not.
Right. So, but that is more common, I think, but it's still very rare. It's 13 out in every 100,000. That's what we think is the prevalence in men, and I think it's about 3 in 100,000 women who get that feeling. I'm no expert on gender dysphoria. It's not something I've treated, but my understanding of it is that the core is that you feel that you just feel that you're a different gender identity to the one that's been assigned you, and that kind of dysphoria could be because you feel that you're the opposite gender to what you've been assigned, or you feel you're even the third gender, that you probably don't ascribe to either, or that you're fluid in your gender identity feels fluid.
Can move from one to another, or is on a spectrum?
Yeah, I think when people talk about, no, I think for some people it can move from one to the other. It's fluid, and that probably maps on more accurately to, well, not necessarily maps on to bisexuality, but sexuality is another element, I suppose, to who you are. It's a component of your identity, but they don't necessarily map on. So yes, you might go from a feeling of maleness to a feeling of femaleness in different contexts, maybe.
Because I get confused, and I really should know more about this. It's my ignorance, in that there is also a movement that I've read about where gender becomes almost an irrelevance, or a categorization that's either not valid or not useful. So almost a denial that gender is a thing.
Let's not deny that gender exists as a social construct, right? That's
also as a physiological one, or is that old-fashioned thinking?
No, I mean there is an anatomical aspect to gender assignment, right? And that's different to a gender role, if you like.
I see. Yeah, I do.
Right.
And then we get into the idea of what is masculine and what is feminine, I suppose, when you come to gender roles. So fighting is masculine, nurturing is feminine would be a typical stereotype.
Right.
Which people find unuseful.
And we all know, I mean, I think even before we get into the issue of gender dysphoria and transgender psychiatry, what you're asking is, should we be questioning the sort of homogeneity of the classical male and female genders anyway? Because we know that there are men who have more feminized characteristics, but would still identify themselves as male. I mean, what is it? Does it become an almost meaningless construct? Well, I don't know. Maybe there are some core features. There must be, because otherwise, why would you have a transition from one gender to another unless you identified with the opposite gender quite strongly? Yeah. So there must be a core.
It wouldn't be a transition then.
No,
either. It would be just a state of mind or whatever.
Yeah.
It's true, because I was thinking in terms of if it is a spectrum, you do get very traditionally manly males, strong, brave, tough, hairy, all the way down to,
And it is a spectrum. Well, it's often said that that there are more differences within the genders than there are between the genders in psychological testing, or even their performance on personality tests.
Is it a little bit like politics when you've got a mild Tory and a mild Labour supporter can sometimes have more in common than a mild Tory and a very extreme Tory?
Yeah.
In other words, it's their moderateness which they have in common.
Yeah.
Even though one is slightly blue and one is slightly red.
Yeah. So you could say on average, men have slightly better visuospatial map reading abilities than women. But there's
Careful.
No, it's true.
Is it really?
But there is a huge overlap. If you imagine the two bell curves, they're pretty much almost overlapping, but there's a slight shift to the right for men versus women. Then you realise what gender differences mean.
Yeah.
Because that is just a very, very small difference in the average performance. So, of course, you get some very good female map readers, very poor male.
Love the bell curve. That is where the bell curve really serves, when you've got them overlaid, because then you can see the median and probably the average are very, very close. Although,
because it depends on how fat the bell curve is. But
there's always
assuming they're both quite fat, there will be a huge overlap, I think. Yep.
So my question was this, and it's different. In the old horrible days when someone suffering from gender dysphoria could be diagnosed with a mental illness, is the other thing a risk, in that certainly someone who has a fundamental unhappiness is thinking they're born in the wrong body or the body of the wrong gender. I'm wondering whether that can cause distress, which could be classified as a mental illness. Anxiety, depression, I'm thinking.
No, but gender dysphoria is listed as it is a disorder insofar as it's causing suffering.
Or it deviates from normal.
But it's yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see. So the fact that someone is unhappy, i.e. the dysphoria, means it's something that needs attention.
The issue is just what is the solution for that? There is a conscious awareness of being born in the wrong body pre-puberty.
Wow.
It's just that the dysphoria becomes much stronger when the sexual hormones kick in, which then create the secondary sexual characteristics. And it is the job of paediatricians working with child psychiatrists to decide whether someone who comes to them at that age should have their puberty arrested or delayed with hormones until they're a little bit older. And in this country, gender reassignment, it happens as an adult, so from the age of 18.
So is it something that the gender dysphoria can fade? So you have this feeling that you're a girl, but you feel like a boy, and then as puberty comes, that feeling can fade, and you live your life as a girl following that.
I think that's unusual.
Right. So it's really that's really quite interesting. So it's a thing that tends to persist, huh?
Yeah. But just because you call something a label like gender dysphoria doesn't mean it is what we think it is. And sometimes there are complex family dynamics going on. And when you look into that, then you might decide, okay, this person doesn't require gender reassignment. You know what I mean? Because it's not what we thought it was. It's not living in the wrong body. It's perhaps identifying with certain very influential caregivers or mentors. Got it. Distorting the sense of self, which, I mean, first of all, take someone who says that they have gender dysphoria seriously, but to do a multidisciplinary assessment.
So that was coming on to the next thing, is that I've read things where there is a lot of worry expressed that gender reassignment could be seen as the answer to some maladies which look like gender dysphoria but are in fact something else. And of course, gender reassignment is a serious thing and often not easily reversed, obviously. Yeah. And a lot of people are worried of misdiagnosing it, recommending surgery, physical surgery, obviously, which is hard to reverse and quite dramatic, and the worry that unnecessary surgery could in fact happen. Is that something you worry about?
All decisions about surgery would be made by a specialist gender reassignment clinic, or should be made by some people who are specialised in that area. Not a general adult psychiatrist. Not the man in the street, not the family.
That's kind of comforting.
But you're right that gender dysphoria could be an expression of something else going on. For example, anorexia, depression, general social anxiety around the opposite sex, that kind of thing.
Could it be the mind experimenting? So say you're a young adult or adolescent and you're unhappy, and you trying desperately to understand the source of your unhappiness, when in fact you're actually suffering from depression, but you don't understand depression, and you're looking for a reason for these horrible feelings, and you don't relate well to people of your gender.
And maybe you're not an alpha male, for example, or you're a girl and you don't feel particularly feminine, and you're trying to work out, you know. So you can see how you could get lean one way or the other at a vulnerable time in your life.
And that's what you're looking for when someone presents. You're looking for something underlying that might cause the feeling that, I wonder if it's because I'm a boy, I should have been born a girl.
It's complex, and it needs, this sort of assessment needs to be carried out by someone who's very experienced in that area. I think it's quite a specialised area. I'm a general adult psychiatrist, and I think what we would deal with are the psychological sequelae of people perhaps delaying the decision for gender reassignment, or having complications from gender reassignment, and having all the other complications that can go with it, like depression, anxiety, and minority stress, which is essentially the consequence of discrimination.
Just winding back the tape, did you say sequelae?
Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. Sequelae.
It just slipped out. It must be the Dead Pony Club.
Were you trying to say another word that exists, or does that word exist? Please tell me it exists.
Yeah.
Sequelae.
Yeah.
God, what does it mean?
Consequences.
Absolutely fantastic. Right, the next Ponzi business meeting I'm in, which will be within the next 12 hours almost certainly, that's going in the agenda.
You're lapping that up, aren't you?
Any more sequelae, gentlemen? Ladies?
That wouldn't be the
Ladies?
correct. That would be the
Gentlemen?
slightly wrong use of
No more sequelae?
the word. So that'd make you look like a tit.
Oh, right, hang on. What does it mean again? Let's see if I can get it right context.
Well, it's
Consequences.
It's not like any more sequelae, as in any more secondary points.
Oh, right.
It's like it's a consequence. For example, depression might be a sequelae.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's try this then.
Sequelae of stress include depression, anxiety.
Okay, so you're the client, and I go, yes, we're going to implement this piece of boring software. Do you think there's going to be any sequelae as a result of that, Dr. Keedwell?
Sounds wrong.
Ah,
I think it should be more medical.
Oh, that is just typical.
Yeah,
because
we own all the Latin words, man.
Absolutely. And we try. Yeah, we'll try. And
someone's going to write it now and say it's not Latin.
Yeah, that's right. Sequelae. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, no, leave that to the medics. F you, man.
Oh yeah, don't write in, by the way, because I won't. Email me.
What is the email address?
Go on, you tell us.
hi@ytlf.com. And our handle is ytlf.com. What's our postal address then, Paul?
Your house, Chatham, Kent, UK.
PO Box FU.
Feel free to knock on his door whenever you feel frustrated.
So I got another question, and it's about the concept of there being no gender. So Sam Smith, the very talented singer, recently came out or said he feels he has no gender. Or he doesn't want to be associated with any particular gender. Fair enough. How does that play in to the mix? Or is the fact that you feel you're the wrong gender means that you must have some idea of the concept of gender in order to feel that you're the wrong one, if you see what I mean?
I think it just means he feels that he's a real has a galaxy of male and female characteristics that don't conform to one. So he can't come down on one fence or the other.
That sounds quite cool, actually.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah,
because we were saying how much male and female characteristics overlap, weren't we?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, personally, I've never really believed in typical female roles. My mother's quite a strong woman, right, and quite assertive, and those are thought to be male characteristics. I don't know. I think
I would like to wrestle her.
I think men and women are largely the same, but they may have different needs in relationships.
So it's
depending
quite
on
strange,
which gender they identify with, and they're free to change that if they want to. But most people, it's fairly fixed in puberty. So we're talking about people for whom, well, if you're going for gender reassignment, you're fairly certain that your gender is fixed too. It's just that it's different. Your gender identity is different to the body you were born into.
Yeah, that was what I was asking, really. So you've answered that well. Funnily enough, my family upbringing is slightly different from yours in that it was quite traditional, in that both my mother and father gladly, it seems, fell into what you'd call gender stereotypical roles. Mum was the nurturer who changed all the nappies, cook all the food.
Same in my house, actually.
And Dad would go out and the bacon, bring home the bacon, as it were. And I remember, it's strange, it's only a generation ago, my sisters were sent to elocution lessons, but I was not.
But you were not.
That's right. So they were learning.
How was it you sound so posh then?
Well, grammar school did that.
Well, you went to prep school, didn't you?
I went to prep school and then grammar school. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
The prep
You're
school
like
probably
Stephen Fry, aren't you?
I'm a little bit like Steve. I'm damaged, and anxious. I'm anxious like
I'm not
Stephen
saying you're
Fry.
damaged. I'm just saying you're posh.
I am a little bit, but Yorkshire posh, which is a different kind of posh.
Did you get measured by a tailor to go to prep school?
I got measured by a tailor every different direction, and I was like, "Do you really need to measure that?" And he said, "I saw you can." No, but seriously,
yes.
There is some anxiety that I still feel as a result of prep school, because it was quite strict, and there was this idea of finishing your meal before you're allowed to get down from the table. Not uncommon, but enforced with a military to a military extent, in that you literally couldn't get down. And that actually did instill some anxiety about eating in me, which I still carry forward to today.
Get a little bit scared about being given a big portion of food.
Still,
you think someone's going to force you to eat it all.
Force you to be very, very cross and tell you.
And you generally always leave a little bit behind, just because you can't quite finish.
I do a little bit, and I remember thinking, don't. And it was, I suppose, I went to school in the early 70s, so the end of the Second World War was only 25 years before that, and it was eat your meat then, or eat the meat. Make sure you eat the meat.
Okay, so going back to transgender, what else have you got for me?
Well, I just thought, is there any other thing apart from depression and anxiety that suffering from gender dysphoria can be associated with?
Anorexia. And that's an interesting one.
How does that work?
Eating disorders in general. How does that work?
The connection.
I think that probably any discomfort with your body around puberty, when gender dysphoria is at its maximum, you can see how that might lead to an eating disorder.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, I don't know if you know this, but you can delay your menarche if you're a girl by not eating. So you can delay the time at which you start menstruating and develop secondary sexual characteristics. And in some cases, anorexia is an expression of a reluctance to become a woman.
Is that something that they do deliberately, or is it
Deliberately or unconsciously?
Is that a fear of growing up, or a discomfort? I can't think of the word now. A discomfort in the gender they've been assigned as.
Well, that's what I'm hypothesizing there. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
Or it's a way of trying to gain back control when that control's been taken away from you. Because anorexia is, all the eating disorders are kind of a control thing. So you can see how that be a metaphor for, okay, well, you've assigned me the wrong gender. That makes me feel out of control. I'm going to try and regain control.
Yeah. I like that hypothesis. Strong hypothesis, Doctor. So if you're concerned that someone who is presenting saying, I am a young woman, but I feel like I'm trapped in a woman's body and I feel much more like a male. How do you unpick that just to make sure that it is gender dysphoria and nothing nothing is it's not a manifestation of some other problem?
Well, I don't know because I've not worked with children, but I do know from a child psychiatrist friend of mine actually, who he was of the opinion that a high proportion of children that are brought to him, because he works in specifically in endocrine, so that's hormone disorders, which would then presumably include, sometimes he'd be consulted on someone who wanted to delay puberty, for gender reassignment purposes, or just for them to have some time to think about it. Because actually, if you are genuinely gender dysphoric and you feel you're born in the wrong body, it's incredibly distressing to then develop these secondary sexual characteristics, as you can imagine.
Of course, yeah.
But so his opinion was that a lot of the time the parents were quite pushy. So you've got to be, and it's very important to take the child sometimes out of the family for one-to-one psychotherapy. And when I say psychotherapy, I don't necessarily mean, let us talk about your father.
Is this an excuse for me to do my German accent at all?
I mean, it's sort of
No,
supportive counselling, really, and gently exploring
Yeah.
whether it was this child's own idea that they had gender dysphoria. Because don't forget that if you're a fairly shy, malleable kid, to have a parent saying, "I think you've got gender dysphoria," that does happen.
Does that happen? Yeah.
Well, let's not forget that parents aren't perfect sometimes, and they can be carrying their own pathologies, and they can project that onto their children, and it happens a lot.
And desperate to find a reason.
So you have to rule that out. But I would say that because I don't want us to be attacked for saying, "Oh, we're not taking transgender seriously." The majority of people who feel they're born into the wrong body need referral to a gender reassignment clinic. It needs to be taken seriously. I'm just saying you must check for other things.
Yeah, no, that's what I was slightly concerned about when misdiagnosis by a suggestible, particularly very young person who's confused, possibly depressed, and it's not that it's not that it's fashionable or anything, but it's something that is so much more visible now, then maybe there's that risk of misdiagnosis, which could have quite serious consequences.
But at the same time, that is not saying that we shouldn't offer people gender reassignment, given that the statistics show that the majority of people who undergo gender reassignment surgery are happy with the results, and in most cases, when they're not, it's just because of they're not happy with the aesthetic results of the surgery, rather than they're not happy with the fact that they've had the gender reassignment.
Very different. Yeah, that's actually great and very positive. In terms of the mental health of people who have gone through a transition, do you have any views or even hard data on improvements in mental health outcomes of someone who's been unhappy with the body they have been born with and have gone to some lengths to change that? It sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, it sounds like that can sometimes have a positive effect on...
Well, you can extrapolate that from what I've said, can't you? Yeah. The majority of people who undergo gender reassignment end up feeling happier, because, I mean, they've had to live in the wrong body as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, of course.
And the only factors that would lead to distress following gender reassignment is people not accepting them as their new transgender. And
the brave people who pioneered both the surgery and being subject to the surgery, you've got to take your hat off to them, because it was an unusual thing, and it's becoming less unusual thing to have known someone who's been through gender reassignment.
It feels wrong and unusual if you haven't met someone who's got genuine gender dysphoria.
Yeah. And I know a couple of people now who I've seen go through transition, and it's sort of pleasing to know how just matter of fact it feels now, and particularly for my kids who just see it as something someone goes through, just like any surgery. Having an appendix out is just as regular as that.
You know, it's going to take a period of adjustment to someone's different identity, but get over it, deal with it. It's much less to deal with than what they've had to deal with, I guess, through their childhood.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a couple more questions if we've got time.
Yeah.
One is there a link between people with gender dysphoria and people who enjoy temporary living as a woman? I'm thinking about people who enjoy cross-dressing and activities like that. Is someone who enjoys cross-dressing a symptom that they might have gender dysphoria, or is it just something that they do as a man or as a woman that they simply enjoy? They enjoy...
Well, that's just dressing up in... dressing up, say, if you're a boy and you enjoy dressing up in women's clothing, or an adult, that's just one behaviour. That doesn't indicate whether this is just something they enjoy, or a sexual fetish, or a transsexual behaviour. You need to ask more questions.
They're completely independent.
I'm not saying they're independent, but you need more information.
Yeah.
So is this a behaviour that reflects a desire to be a different gender?
And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
In the case of Eddie Izzard, it isn't. He says he just likes, he gets a kick out of wearing lipstick and dressing in a feminine way, because he's getting in touch with the feminine side of himself. But he would never say that he's sexually oriented towards men.
Nope.
For example, he doesn't want to lead totally gender. He doesn't want a transition. So he's what you call qualifies as someone is a transvestite.
That's what he calls himself. So that's obviously not an offensive term. You've got to be careful about what terms you use, because some of us old-fashioned can be offensive. But I'm sure he calls himself transvestite. That's what he calls himself.
Oh, he does, yeah.
I wore a dress once at a party. Quite liberating. Wasn't sexy, and I certainly didn't look sexy. I looked the opposite of sexy, really.
No, you're terrible in drag.
Yeah, but
you're not pretty.
No, I'm not a pretty girl.
Well, I used to think I was quite a hot
You're all right. Well, you got nice legs because you've got those very skinny, weak limbs.
I like to think shapely.
Shapely, yes. Non-athletic limbs.
A runner's limbs.
When you've lost a bit of weight, you've got decent female body. Yeah. Me, terrible of either gender. But yeah, dressing up in a dress was fun. It was.
I think you need to invent your own third gender.
a bad specimen of either gender.
No, not at all. Be proud.
Yeah, no, I am quite
Be
proud.
proud of being with your own third genderedness.
Well, that's what I like about these days, is that people can be proud to be whatever they are, and it's nice. One thing, though, maybe the last thing that we would discuss is when it comes to gender realignment surgery and it helping, or in fact, completely getting rid of gender dysphoria potentially. Are there gradations? So is it a binary thing? So if you're a woman and you feel like you are trapped in a woman's body, but you want to live your life as a man, is it something that you have to do whole?
Do you have to go for the whole thing?
I don't quite know what to say without.
I knew where you were going. It was fine.
I know, you just let me carry on.
Yeah.
It's an absolute
I wanted
minefield.
to. I know. No, it's not. It's basically
for a
no.
Gammon. It's very difficult. Not to say the wrong thing.
The majority of transgender folk, I believe, have not had the full reassignment surgery, or don't feel the need to.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but it's an individual choice.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
And I suppose it must be so liberating when you get to the stage you're happy with, physically.
Which no one should dictate, by the way. It's up to the individual.
Yeah, I'd have thought there's as many different ways of expressing it as there are people.
Yes, really. Correct. Because at the end of the day, it's, there is a huge variation, as we said, within what we call conventional gender roles.
Exactly.
Right? So, are you done with questions? Because I thought you were going to ask me the classic one, which is, so is this environmentally determined,
great question.
Or by genetics, by congenital factors?
So nature nurture kind of thing. God, what an obvious question! I'm the worst interviewer ever. I go on these pathetic flights of fancy, and I don't get the killer question. I'd be a rubbish interviewer on telly, which is what I'm trying to do here. No, I was about to ask that,
but maybe that's because you know the answer already.
I don't. I'm just.
What's your gut feeling on it?
My gut feeling is that it is not environmental. It is not genetic, and it is just something in the way people are.
So it's not environmental. How can it not be genetic?
Is that one?
There is one other option.
That's the one I'll go for. What the third way? Is it?
Well, no, conditions in the womb. So if you're exposed to certain abnormal hormonal conditions in the womb, that was one theory. But most people now are resting on the idea that it's to do with a combination of hormones and genetics. You can be born with male genitals but have a feminized brain.
Oh, I see.
And in fact, there have been some studies where using MRI scans of the anatomy of the brain and finding differences in adults which aren't there in children. And this puzzled people for a while, and saying, well, okay, if this is a neurodevelopmental condition, if you're born with this, why can't you see feminized aspects of the brain in boys? Why can you only see it after puberty or in adults? And that led to the development of the activation theory, which is that there is the genetic program is there to feminize the male, the trans male brain, but that that's only activated at puberty when you get an increase in gonadotrophins.
Is that to say then,
which determine your secondary sexual characteristics?
Well, this sounds feasible. So what I think I'm hearing is that you can be psychologically female and physiologically male.
Well, you can be outwardly male in terms of your genitalia when you're born.
So I meant by physical.
But you can be have the opposite kind of brain makeup.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Which kind of, if that
it's controversial, but that's where we are at the moment. I think
it's a great theory because it justifies.
Well, it's no different to being gay. I mean, it's thinking that it is different, but it's the neurodevelopmental fact that people are born programmed to be gay. I believe that to be true, although it's going to be on a spectrum, and obviously gender fluidity comes in there, as I said. I don't think it's a minefield. I think it's just complicated and not as binary as we thought it was.
No, I can see that, and that must be even more confusing if you're sort of.
Well, maybe that's why you don't get that's why transsexualism is going to be as broad a church as homosexuality is.
Yeah.
Because homosexuality is on a gradation to heterosexuality with bisexuality in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's why you get some transsexuals who want the full gender reassignment and others who don't.
I quite like that analogy. I hope it's not.
I don't think it's any.
I don't think it's
a. Well, I don't know. I don't see how it can be offensive. It's just a theory, but I can't. It's a theory based on, what humans are like. It's what makes us wonderful creatures in a way, is that we have this immense variation, not just in our appearance, but in our psychology as well.
Which makes it interesting. Yeah, I think tolerance and understanding they're the big things of things that are different. I do like that theory that it's middle of there's gradations. Otherwise, you'd never have bisexual people. You'd never have anybody who was attracted to men and women. They wouldn't exist if it wasn't something of a spectrum. What I don't like is thinking of how much suffering people have to go through before they
in order to express their true selves.
Yeah, it's sad. I hope it's better these days. I think it probably is.
I think it's improving all the time, and that's why people are coming forward more, I think, for help when they're feeling depressed or anxious. Perhaps they've delayed the decision to transition, or they're coming to you, sadly, because they're suffering discrimination and rejection. And that is, I think, the role of psychiatry in the 21st century, is to deal with those two things and not to go, well, let's go back to your childhood and find out why you feel you're in the wrong body, because you must have had some kind of significant event, which is now completely outmoded.
Good. Well, the 2 or 3 people at work I've known who've transitioned, and I think it's right to say they were all transitioning from men to women, have all come out incredibly boldly and with great energy and enthusiasm, and they're very tolerant of the fact that it's strange for some people.
Oh yeah.
And the 2 or 3 cases, the 2 cases I can think of particularly, they've made it very easy for people by just being completely open out there, open even to questions.
Right.
And they do all seem happy, content in what they've done, which is
good. Well, one would hope we've got a family around them that is, giving them a lot of support.
I don't know either very well.
Friends, people who've known for a long time. And I think that if it's done properly, if you prepare for reassignment properly, you make sure your network's in place, your support network's in place first, because you would inevitably face some difficulties from some areas, because unfortunately we're not quite woke yet as a society, are we, across the board? And you only have to watch that brilliant series. What was it? Transparent. It was about a guy transitioning in his middle age. He finally got the courage to do it.
Again, so you got to Caitlyn Jenner as well as a sort of inspiration for those. I mean, the 2 people I'm thinking of, they were great. They were fun. They were out there, and sort of like not shining away anyway. That was great. But one thing they did have is, to be fair to my work colleagues, some even very old and traditional Gammon-esque people would go, "God, did you hear about Steve wants to be known as Susan or whatever?" And you'd go, well, "Yes," and they'd go, "Well, I think that's fantastic." 9 times out of 10, you'd hardly ever get any comments of people going, "Oh, that's a bit weird." And I think we have moved on, and it's not negating in any way the suffering people.
We're changing. I think
there's always the occasional idiot.
Well, we don't want to minimise the difficulties people have.
No, of course not.
But yeah, things are moving in the right direction, I guess.
And on that
positive note,
let's end on a positive note.
We shall thank you for listening to us again.
Yes.
Once again on our second only episode of season 2.
Yep.
And we really, really be keen for you to go and give us a rating.
Yep.
The highest rating possible.
We welcome non-transgender people. We welcome transgender people. And we welcome comments, actually. And, they don't have to be. It's nice if they're good comments. But if you think that we're...
No, we want constructive criticism.
That's it.
We won't listen to trolls. All we want is 5 stars, please.
5 stars, please.
5 stars. Do go to ytlf.com and do email us at hi@ytlf.com.
Speak soon.